Hello.
Hey Tim, how are you, sir?
Good, thank you. How about you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the sort of the time to jump on here with me. I just want to quickly introduce myself, Tim. You prefer Tim, Dr. Spurrier? What do you
No,
prefer?
Tim is fine.
Names are important to me as a school leader, and so I want to make sure
Yeah.
that I'm explicit about that, if you will. So again, just by way of introduction, Tim, Peter Young. For the last 13 years, I've been a school leader, principal, both in public as well as private schools. Most recently, I'm in the DC area, just in Montgomery County, Maryland here. Prior to that, I was the elementary and middle school division head in Cape Town, South Africa at the American
Uh,
School. And then prior to that, I was a principal here in Washington, D.C. for 6 years at the elementary level. My father passed away about 6, 7 months ago. And so what I needed to do at that time was step in to support his business, our family business, commercial real
mm,
estate. So I had to resign my principal position. I've now really just in the last couple of weeks pivoted to both the podcast as well as a new ed consulting firm where we design custom AI tools to help schools and school districts. But again, the podcast is really to talk to school leaders, public, private, charter, parochial, about lots of different topics. So that's what we're doing today. But again, just wanted to give you that context. I'm recording the session as well, Tim. Currently,
okay.
right now, the podcast lives between you and I. And what I mean by that is the 10 or so guests that I've had, some have wanted the private recording. For now, there is no public platform where these will be posted to. If and
Mhm.
when that happens, let's say a YouTube channel, I will come back to you to ask
Okay.
for your permission. But at this time, it lives here. If the recording is something that you want, great. If not, it'll live on my computer and that'll be it. So,
Okay.
um, okay.
Yeah,
So if
that's
you don't
fine.
mind, Tim, just go ahead and sort of introduce yourself for everybody. Share with us whatever you want specifically about Barnhart or otherwise, and then we'll
Okay.
jump in.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. My name is Tim Spurrier. I'm the head of school at Barnhart School. We're located in Arcadia, California. We're about 17 miles away from the downtown Los Angeles area. Barnhart has been a school that's been around for about 65 years. It actually started as a school that really focused on inclusion and making
Mhm.
sure that our community was represented and has stayed that way over the 65 years. And, now over the last couple of years, we've really tried to focus on individualization, making sure that kids are, we focused on their social well-being, their emotional well-being as much as their academics. We of course had a little bit of a dip in private schools and enrollment and after COVID. We're actually on a rebound right now. Over the last 3 years, we've increased about 60% in
Oh wow.
enrollment relatively, about 25% last year to this year.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm just taking notes as you talk.
Sure.
So when I look down, Tim, that's what I'm doing. So yes,
Okay, not a problem.
all good. So thank you for that. When I reached out to you thinking about the topic for today, about sort of funding schools, I know funding obviously is a
Mm,
big conversation at all independent schools. Like I said,
right.
I've spoken to a bunch of independent school leaders, some I think one charter and some public school leaders, but for sure within the realm of independent school leaders, funding and how we fund schools, right? So I was a product of independent schools here in the DC area. Both my children currently go to independent schools here in the DC area. So that's always a topic of conversation. So as we dive into that topic, I guess the first question is, I think the default thinking is obviously, oh, we're going to hike tuition by 3, 4%. Dear
Right.
parents, oh, it's another tuition hike. So I want to just dig below that a little bit, Tim, from
Mhm.
your perspective at Barnhart. What are some things that you all have considered over the years aside from tuition hikes, if you will?
Yeah, so I was going to say, it is kind of a constant flow of raising tuition, and I think independent schools a lot of times are pricing themselves out of the market completely, especially in high cost areas like we're in here. I was previously in Hawaii for a
Okay.
total of 18 years, and again, I honestly couldn't understand sometimes how people were able to afford the cost of housing, food, and sending their kids to school, but the perceived value, of course, is there. So,
Sure.
people make it happen. But here, I think, in addition to the hikes that we've had to make, I think it is programmatic and really trying to make sure that you understand the market. One of the biggest problems I think that we have in education, period, is that we really don't always know what people really want. Part of what I do is the marketing type research to make sure that what we're delivering is what people want. It doesn't do any good if you're in an area that where nobody really cares about the social emotional learning. Nobody cares about the hands-on type of stuff. I mean, I
Yeah,
think most people do, but it's when you really do like a market analysis and you find, okay, what's in the area that is really succeeding? What are people looking for? Then you can kind of develop your programs around that. And I think sometimes schools don't look at it that way. They think, okay, we're who we are, so this is just what we're going to do. And so many small schools across the country have done that, and then they've gone out of business. And we're even seeing it in this area. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say this school had struggled also. We're on the
sure.
rebound. But I think, we look at, some of the schools in the area. Well, if your enrollment has gone from like 200 to 60, which we know a few of the schools have done that,
Right,
then something you're not meeting some need. Either your
right,
price is too high or you are not really fulfilling a need that's been out there in the community.
right. So let me ask you the same
Mhm.
question that you just posed to yourself, which
Yeah.
is what do parents want? So I'm intrigued by this idea of a market analysis. I think as a school
Yeah.
leader, people probably don't do that often enough, Tim. So what is it in the last maybe couple of years as you've done these analyses that you've unearthed?
Yeah.
A, and then B, has that shifted sort of what Barnhart ultimately delivers to the students and the families?
Right. Let me say that again. I think that the areas have all different types of needs. And so I,
Right.
I do believe that there's a school for everybody. You'll find that kind of the style of learning that you want. But the things that we really have found to be needed is schools that take a look at the individual child and parents, I think, want their child to not be just a number. When you're looking at, I'm actually a product of public schools just
Mhm.
outside of Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
The class sizes even back then were huge. I feel for teachers and administrators in those positions because how do you meet the need of every individual? So
Right.
I think parents feel that also. It's like my child is gifted and my child is has ADHD and my child has dyslexia.
Right.
How do you make sure that all those children are provided for with the services and the get their needs met? And a lot of schools, I think, don't really look at that individual, kind of tailor their curriculum around it. What we've done here is not that I don't believe social emotional learning was important all along, but I don't know that we put an emphasis on it. I think that one of the things COVID did was really, I think parents were beginning to see, look at the stress
Right.
that's being put on our
Yeah.
children. Look at the increases in suicide rates among teenagers. We have to do something about it now. So we looked at that and we said, okay, we're going to put together programs where every child is known. I know it's a
Mhm.
cliche,
No,
but
for sure.
so it's really important that we know how to address our individual needs, whether it's and sometimes we can't,
Right.
and then really trying to form the partnership with the parents. What we've been able to do here at Barnhart, I think a lot of schools do this, but we really are focusing on the partnership between the parent
Hmm.
and the school. And the partnership has to be authentic and genuine. Everybody says it, we have a family type atmosphere in the school.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay. Some families you don't want to be a part of, right?
Right. Yeah,
You
that's a good point.
And so when they come in here, they kind of know what they're getting, and they know that we are going to step in when we think that something needs to happen with their child. We know that they will step in and say to us, "Hey, like something's going on at home. We're seeing the stress. We have a ton of kids who mask at school, right?
Right.
They're doing great here, and then they go home and fall apart. That then our parents now feel okay with giving us a call and saying, hey, maybe the homework needs to be adjusted. Maybe the amount of, the pressure that they're having in school, they're just not telling you. We've really designed our program around
Right.
that individualization, making sure that we understand the emotional needs of the kids, asking questions like, way around here now. I mean, we look at the kids and we say, how are you feeling?
Right.
Not like, what are you doing? That kind of thing. Like, how are you feeling to try to get a little bit better response and try to understand them more.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I'm just curious, is there a specific like SEL program that you use, or is it sort of a combination of approaches, Tim?
Yeah, combination, but I mean, we were really impressed with Ruler, which is, from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. We're kind of in the process right now of our year-long teacher training. Like
Okay.
I sent a team of four, including myself, to do the training, and now we have a weekly, monthly, different types of training that we do with our teachers. We found that I think it hit all the things that we kind of wanted to do. We use responsive classroom and I think that combination seems to be working well. I would have liked to, my idea of everything is, hey, let's just jump into it and we're going to do it, right?
Good.
And
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
yeah, the people at Yale like they're intelligent people. So it's like,
Right.
let's listen to what they said and let's like roll it out over a
Right. You
year.
got to slow down sometimes.
Exactly.
No, I say a lot, let's go slow to go fast. You know
Right.
what I mean? I've said that to staff before and parents, like, let's take our time with this new thing so that, once it's installed or implemented, then we can go pretty quickly. Yeah. No,
Right.
I had a very supportive parent body at one time in a board who paid for all the teachers to go to do RC training one, right? So
Mhm.
just so we created a
Yeah.
baseline, and we actually made that a stipulation of coming on board as a teacher at the school. You had to
Mhm.
agree to participate in RC1 if you wanted to
Right.
become a teacher at the school. So
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. RC, obviously comes out of Massachusetts, so I've been
Right.
sort of in this area. And I saw online that you did some work there at Harvard. I was lucky enough to get my
Yeah.
master's in school leadership at Harvard and the graduate
Wonderful.
school there. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah, that was a great program. It was, spread out over 4 years. And I think that it was good in that I was able to really learn more about part of the business side because it's kind of
right,
conducted the combination of the
for sure,
two schools there. And it really helped me a good bit looking at a little bit more at the bigger picture and
right,
also opened my mind to things because even though I was a teacher in public schools, I was never an administrator of public schools
yeah,
and getting to see that comment,
yeah,
gave me a whole different perspective
right,
and also told me I never ever want to be a superintendent.
right.
It's like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just as valuable to learn what you don't want to do, right?
exactly.
Yeah, no, I've had the benefit of doing both, and like with anything in life, there are pros and cons to both, right, Tim? And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. Sort of back to the parents in terms of not necessarily school funding, but you talk about sort of really catering to the individual child, making sure that they're known. Obviously, you have to probably for some parents justify what that price tag is.
Right.
We were talking, aside from tuition, I'm sure there's an element of fundraising.
Mhm.
On the flip side of that, because you just mentioned, which I appreciate, sort of learning more about the business side of school. So I'm curious
Yeah.
to dig into that. What have you learned in terms of the business side? Where maybe some pain points operationally or logistically that you guys either currently have or you're thinking about? Because I feel like just like we want to raise money or bring money into the school. Sometimes the opposite helps too, where we can decrease or eliminate certain costs or inefficiencies as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've really taken a look at a good bit of like what we need and what we can have. Those are the kind of things.
Right.
And we do kind of go a little bit more onto the need for us. So, for an example, I really am seeing that we don't currently have a counselor at our school. So we've tried to do some arrangements with outside agencies to, where parents may have to pay directly, but it would be on campus instead
Right.
of them having to take their kids off. But there's an example of,
Right.
looking at having to be a little bit more creative with being able to get some of the services that you need. But also, I
Mhm.
think the hire a counselor and while in the budget that they may not be there, luckily I have a really great board here that says, okay, we see a long-term picture and
Right.
where, we may have to run a little bit of a deficit this year. We will do that because we see the long term would be better. What I'm really finding though, and this is I think a trend that's happening in a lot of independent, it's again, I'm talking more small independent schools, is that most of the money is running out that they put aside. So schools that have great reserves, that's one thing, but schools that have had smaller reserves, survived through the COVID time by getting PPP and now ERC. Getting those type of things have really propped them back up, but it's kind of a false propping up, you know,
Right. Yeah.
because so many schools are running deficits and when you do that, you just have to try to figure out like what can you cut from the budget that's not going to have an impact on the students. Unfortunately, teachers take the brunt of it a lot. I would like to pay my teachers, all of them, $30,000, $40,000 more than
Or
what they're
yeah,
getting.
of course.
You
Yeah.
know, and I think that's kind of the goal. And even with teachers, sometimes I have to say to them, hey, when we get to a certain number of students here, we will be able to, like I'm going to look after them first.
Right.
They're going to be able to get some.
Right.
So in that big picture, I think you have to kind of take a look at those things.
Tim, just remind me, how many students do you guys have?
So we currently have 135.
35.
Yeah.
What would be the dream number if you could choose a
Uh,
number?
Anywhere between 150 and 180,
Yeah.
and we've actually over the 3 years, I put together kind of a fiscal recovery plan for, when I came in, I walked into, it was 84 students.
Oh, wow.
At one point, the school was in the 300s and it dropped down now to 84. We've been able to build back up again by, yeah, but I put in like here are the first 3-year goal, and 135 was actually what our goal was. And we
Mm.
met that this year.
Yeah.
Year 4 and 5, it's got to go up to about 150. I think yesterday I wrote down a new number was 162. I think I did that to this person said, this is where
Right.
I think we would feel most comfortable at that point.
Yeah.
Uh,
And just curious to know, because again, every school does this differently.
yeah.
We snap our fingers, we get, let's say, 20 more students. Like, what are those, aside from funding necessarily, like,
Yeah.
what do those marketing efforts look like? Because there's a
Right.
million different ways to market yourself, right? You talked about really wanting to say, this is who we are, right?
Right.
How we cater to the individual child. So how do you set yourself apart from other schools? And then
Yeah.
again, what does that marketing look like?
Yeah, and I do believe that people now in this area, we were cursed with the hidden gem, best kept secret thing, and that was the number one thing that we had to eliminate first, is that we had to get out in the public. If you have a little bit larger of a staff, you can send out everybody to do different things, and we're a small staff, so it's just been a few of us, and things that don't seem to have an immediate effect that do. So I joined all the Chamber of Commerces in the area. I made sure that I was going to all the different meetings. With Rotary, I have a talk with an upcoming with one of the Rotaries with the Lions Club. Even though I understand that you're dealing with sometimes people who are not directly having children that are coming to your
Right.
school,
Yeah.
we put that there's a Friday night fair in one of the towns that's near here. We have a booth there. We're the only school that does it, and we'll do things like we'll do it in combination with we'll be doing a clothing drive, so we'll be
Oh,
handing out
sure.
stores. But again, people see our name over and over again, kind of like a political campaign. If you see the
Yeah.
name,
Right.
you begin to start asking the question, and then we try to drive everybody then to come on our campus, not just look at our website, but come on our campus, get the personalized tour. I know a lot of schools do the group tours, and I would really say stay away from the group tours. I've been at schools where we did group tours, and it's
Right.
like, let's stop because everybody wants to feel like you know them and know their child, and only
Right.
way you can do that is having that type of meeting. So a lot of that, and then just getting partnerships, everything that we can do in the community, try to find, again, we actually are starting our own podcast as, with the kids. The kids are going to be doing a podcast. We have them out in the community and doing different activities. We all wear the Barnhart shirt every time now so that
Right.
people see who we are. All those little things help, just to get out there and get into markets that you haven't been at before. Here Arcadia is it's a fairly, well-populated area. Pasadena is next to it. We would get
Right.
most of our kids from Pasadena in there. We weren't going into the other direction at all. And so just getting out there and again, having people
Right.
know who you are. So, like I always know, I go to all those meetings and I say we used to be the best kept secret, but we're not anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you can just say, right, we're just the best. Not even a secret. Just we're the best. Exactly.
That's right.
We were the best kept secret. Now we're just the best, and we're out there now. Obviously, there's always parent pushback. There's always community pushback. What have you seen in terms of pushback, whether it's around what the model is? And again, I get also the sentiment that says, listen, this is who we are as a school. Sort of
Mm,
take it or leave it. That, in my mind, doesn't necessarily. I don't think. I'm not saying you do that. I don't think schools want to
right.
come out and sort of say that kind of
Right.
thing. I know there are some schools and school leaders who do that, and
Yeah.
they're okay. But I also feel like if we're trying to increase enrollment, probably not
Mm.
the best strategy. So what kind of pushback have you seen? Again, not necessarily this year, it's a new school year, but maybe
Yeah.
over the years. And then how do you address that?
Yeah, I would say, parent pushback, we don't get quite as much. We've had a few who, we lean into being inclusive, and we've had a few parents that aren't quite understanding about, we're 75% culturally diverse
Yep.
community. I mean, so we lean into that, and say, okay, again, this is who we are. Like a lot of the other stuff that when we're talking about like how we're individualizing education, that kind of sets you up immediately by saying, okay, if you come to us, let me know your child's needs. Let me try to work on that. We'll come up with a plan for them. So we don't really get like the curriculum kind of
Okay.
pushback, as much, but we do get, a little bit of the oh, don't you see what's going on in our community about the kind of
Uh,
the anti-diversity type of stuff? Well, we are a diverse school. I mean, there's nothing, that's who we are. So if
right.
you're coming here, you've got to be able to realize that right away,
Right.
that's kind of part of it. The other pushback sometimes is that, we've really, really pushed our teachers to do more than than I think they were used to. And, like when any teacher that comes here has to understand that, it's difficult to individualize, right? I mean,
Right.
when you have, our classes are fairly small. I think our largest is 20, but for the most part, they're around 15,
Hmm.
you know, um, and even there, when you have 7 or 8 kids that may have some special needs, hard
Right.
for the
That's
teacher to
that's
be able
hard.
to adjust. But I'll give you an example of how we deal with that. So we have a class at, one of our classes has a lot of new kids in. Teachers beginning to learn who those kids are. And, to be able to meet those needs, I was just in for an hour working with a few of them. My community engagement person was in before that. Until we can actually be able to hire an assistant to be in some of those
Oh, I
classrooms,
see.
we all just kind of get in and we do it. Yeah. So, going back to the pushback, sometimes we just have to let teachers know we're here for them. You don't have to take it all on your own, but we do
Right.
expect you to be able to do
Right.
to be able to meet the needs of every child.
Right. No, I agree. So just thinking again, more broadly speaking for Barnhart, I always like to ask school leaders. I think anecdotal evidence or storytelling is important, right? As we tell our story. So as you think maybe over the years, is there a student or a family or a story slash anecdote where you feel like as you've shifted sort of what it is that you provide as a school, like you were talking about earlier, where you've really sort of found, maybe an example or again, an anecdote where you feel like, man, like we really hit a home run. Again, you don't have to mention names, but I always
Yeah.
think it's important for school leaders to be able to share some of those kinds of anecdotes as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, uh, I'll answer this in a little bit broader sense also,
Yeah.
but I was at an event the other day when one of the superintendents of the public schools were here. And when she got up, she was talking about her test scores, that the test scores were up. And I mean, that's a big accomplishment. So I'm like, good for them too. But
Right.
my first discussion was about one of our kids who just wrote a novel, and from seventh to eighth grade in her spare time. She wrote like a 300 and something page novel on the 100-Year War from a teenager's perspective,
Oh wow, yeah.
and even though academically she's incredibly strong, we've seen kids that have gone through, and I think my point when I was saying that too is that that's not untypical of kids when you give them that opportunity. When they actually get into it, you have kids that are amazing in sports, and when they're given that opportunity, they shine. We have kids who are amazing like at chess or music or whatever, and then
Right.
they begin to shine. And so you give them those opportunities. And we've seen a lot of kids that have come through our school that, maybe came here with, some issues of, like, ADHD is of course a huge issue for kids. But,
Mhm.
last year on our promotional video, we actually have one of our former students was also doing his internship for guidance counseling with us.
Good.
He was talking about the struggle that he had until he actually came here.
Oh
And as
wow,
soon
yeah.
as he got here, he really began to connect with, that trusted adult kind of thing, the adult who kind of grits him through. So I think that we have a lot of those successful, type
Right.
of students that come through and have struggled, early on. So probably more than I can imagine.
For sure.
And I think again, because the school has been dedicated to that, for just a while, I think we just didn't let people know that we were still dedicated to it.
Got
You know?
it.
And
Yeah.
so, we have had some kids that have just done amazing things. And, when I get to go watch them in class, you see like every class, you got kids who are spinning on the floor and you got kids who are
Yeah.
engaged.
Right.
You know?
And it's
And
sometimes a kid spinning on the floor who ends up writing the novel too, right? You like
that's
you never know.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. And that, when you were talking a little bit about pushback, that's sometimes what we'll get.
Yeah.
We'll have parents go like, yeah, but we stopped in and we saw this kid and they were in they were like
Oh,
jumping down and that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, they are. And then they also like, let's show you what, what they produced, after a little bit. It was a little disruptive. Okay, we got them back on
right.
and focused on what's going on. And I do think you're exactly right there.
Right.
I was kind of even look back, like I wasn't the greatest student, coming through because my
Right.
mind was always going in a different direction, and not necessarily always what the class was doing. But I think, academically, I think I've done okay now. And then, so I kind of look at the kids the same way. Like I don't look at them and say, oh, that kid's never going to make it.
Right.
I kind of
Yeah.
look at them and say, okay, we just have to figure out like how they're going to make it, what they're going
Right.
to do.
No, I agree. I mean, I have, I mean, I'll say it. adult ADHD. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but when we were in school, I'm 47. I don't know how old you are, Tim, but when I was in school, that wasn't diagnosed. And again, I was
Yeah.
at an independent school, and it was interesting. I would present a certain way in class, and sort of the jokester or whatever. But then
Mm.
like you put the test in front of me, or you put the standardized test, right? Like for example, I got a perfect writing score on the GRE, right? Like
Mhm.
if you were to tell somebody that, and they say, "Did you know Peter in high school?" and they're like, "What?" You know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's a disconnect there, right? And it's just interesting because our son, who's a seventh grader, he has ADHD and he presents a little, awkward as well. But when you put the things in front of him, he scores much higher than our daughter, who when
Yeah.
you like she was chosen, she goes to a school here, a well-known independent school, and of the 600 or 700 students, no, sorry, 1,000, she and three other students were chosen for their most recent promotional video, right, for
Mhm.
admissions. And so she presents in that way, right? Like you
Right.
speak to her, she's on this speech and debate team, she runs the Model UN Club, right? Like, but like underneath that, like she really has to work hard to learn the academic subjects, where it just
Yeah.
comes much easier to my son. But like he's the kid who in kindergarten, Tim, didn't, he forgot to put on underwear to go to school, right? Or
Right.
like,
Yeah.
right, like things like that.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting to see where you would never guess based on how the two present what the actual,
Right.
end result, or sort of the data, if you will, is. So, yeah, no, it's very interesting, for sure.
And I think that's really, I think the shame of like our education system. We had such an amazing opportunity after COVID to really address some of these issues, and unfortunately, a lot of people went back to being inflexible again. And that's where I think, the issue is kind of like, it's funny that, when I was in high school, and you know how you remember things. So it's 40 years almost for me being out of high
Right.
school,
Yeah, yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
Yeah.
And I remember one of my teachers, my senior year, my English teacher saying to me, "You're an illiterate jock." And I was like, and I bet you I presented that way,
Right.
but
I get it.
I knew what I could do. And,
Right.
I didn't get turned down for any universities that I went to. So I don't think I was quite illiterate.
Yeah.
I'll
No.
take the yes, I was a jock,
Right,
but
right, exactly. That's a good point. Just one or two last questions, Tim, and then I just want to circle back before we close to some of those other things. But, just sort of projecting out, the next 5 years, I think you had mentioned earlier, I wrote down the new number of 162 students, but,
yeah,
3 to 5 years from now, whether it's enrollment, whether it's maybe how you fund the school, different sort of innovations like that. But where do you want Barnhart to be? Um, Either in that regard, academically, programmatically.
yeah, yeah. I think really perfecting kind of what we're looking for, and not a lot of times schools get to a point where they're like, okay, we're good enough, and this is again who we are, so we're just going to be this way. I think that we need to continue to look at what are the newest trends, what are the newest not only trends, but what's research based that we can
Right.
actually use. We introduced Mindprint, doing the cognitive assessments from third to eighth grade. The
Yep.
teachers are actually using the results of that to be able to help them get through to the kids. I think that we are going to go more and more towards neuroscience and neuroeducation to
Yep. Good.
be able to figure things out. I think that as a school here, we'll be dedicated to doing that. On the financial side of it, continuing with the partnerships, we looked at like how do you form other sources of revenue, at the school. And, I know a lot of schools do this, but some schools don't. And, now
Right.
we have soccer leagues, we have a field. Let's use it for soccer leagues. We have speed skating going on for Olympic speed skaters teaching the kids on the weekend to do the rollerblading, and then she takes them to the ice rink next. It's
Right.
like, how do you get all that going? And then, not only when you start, having inviting people and using your space available, then you could start thinking about like, how do I get like adult education on my campus? How do I start
Mm.
getting it for, we have a really, nice facility. How do we get more weddings to be here? Those kind of things. So
Right.
I think that the future of all, again, I think smaller, maybe better, than some of the larger
Yep.
schools. But some of the smaller schools is that you have to really come up with what the source of revenue again. And that comes back to the marketing research. It's like
Right.
what's needed in this area,
Right.
and then be able to provide that. We found like, we redid a basement, we're calling it the den now, not the basement.
See, I like it.
It was like home makeover. It was ugly, and it was there was, like they had piled up stuff downstairs and that. And we put a nice floor in, painted the walls. We did some, like made it inviting, put a television in there, and now we have ballet classes there. We have other things that are coming
Right.
in. So I do think that schools are going to have to look at additional revenue. And then the other thing I was going to say is I believe a lot of schools going forward have got to start thinking about smaller schools of how they merge and how can you keep both schools alive at the same time within one facility. It doesn't make sense to have schools that have 150 and another school that has, unless it's programmatic,
Right.
a school that's 50 and 60 kids.
Right.
They can be on the same campus together.
Yeah.
So
No,
I do
it's
believe that,
interesting.
that's the trend.
Yeah, I talked to an independent school leader in Philadelphia last week, and he
Mhm.
mentioned the same exact thing in terms of they're forced to, or they need to be more creative, and it was
Mhm.
around facility use and renting out. So it was exactly the same thing you were saying. I
Right.
think they have 120 students, something like that. And then yeah, I spoke to a different school leader who she's in a smaller independent school too, and she said the exact same thing. They're exploring the possibility of consolidation
Yeah.
potentially, and or or if they can't sort of increase revenue in some of the other ways that you were describing,
Mhm.
thinking about consolidation as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's interesting that, and I share that because I think we know as school leaders that this is a lonely job, and it's sometimes difficult to know like what's going out there in the ether, if you will, around you.
Right.
You're outside LA. This person was over, I think they're in Philadelphia, that one
Mhm.
person, and then in New York. And so just to know, Tim, that other school leaders of small independent schools are going through the same things that you are,
Yeah.
I think can help sometimes. So,
Yeah, for sure.
just lastly, two things. I want to give you the opportunity to share anything again about Barnhart, and then if you're open to it, I'd love to have a different conversation separate from the podcast if you want to about some of the things that you mentioned about. First of all, the fact that you guys are doing your own podcast, I love
Mhm.
that. One of the things that we do is we support schools with actually the marketing. So like they shoot the podcast, and then we actually through our AI tool will blast it out onto different social media sites. So you actually
Mhm.
don't have to use humans to do that. We use AI powered tools to do that. And
Right.
then separately, different ways to communicate with families. So one school is going to hire us to do an AI agent on their website that
Mhm.
parents around admissions or things can interact with. So then again, humans don't have to spend time doing that. And then what's really cool is the system will flag it if there's any questions that it can't answer, and then it'll send an automatic email to you or somebody to answer
Mhm.
it. So, I know schools have, if you're interested in admissions, click here for a school tour, whatever, like all of those
Right.
things we can automate for you. Again,
Mhm.
separate conversation, but just wanted to share that to see if
Sure.
you'd be open for a call. But
Yeah.
lastly, I want to give you the opportunity again to share anything about Barnhart. And I do have to put in, this isn't a plug. I have a colleague from the East Coast here in the DC area. She just became the new head of school, Tim, over
Mhm.
at the Windward School in
Mhm.
LA. I don't know
Yeah,
if you know Windward.
I've heard of the school. Yeah.
Yeah, her name is Sarah Beck. I'd love, again, you'd have to decide to do this, but to reach
Right.
out to her. She's a brand new school leader. She was the the interim head of the upper school here at the Potomac School in
Mhm.
McLean. That's where my daughter goes. Prior to that, she was a division head at the Langley School, which coincidentally my son goes to. So there's
Right.
some weird connections. And then
Yeah.
way back when she was actually a student teacher with my wife when she was a high school teacher.
Wow.
My wife was a high school teacher. So it's just the small world. And now they've moved
Yeah.
clear across the country, and she's the new head of school at Windward Schools.
Wow.
So again, I
Yeah.
just wanted to share that, but just want to give you again, Tim, the last word,
Yeah.
anything about Barnhart, and then we'll end up from there.
Yeah, no, I just think that there's, a really great energy that's happening at the school at the moment. I think it's important that when you have, this entire team kind of atmosphere. And again, like I was saying, the parents are part of that team here. And, with Barnhart in particular, I think that we'll just continue to grow because I think we are meeting the needs of the kids in the area. It is it's a nice little campus where people can come onto and just feel more at home. You know, and I think we just have to continue to create that and then continue to meet needs. We're discussing how to start little schools within our school. We have some different ideas with that, and I don't know when the timing will be right for it, but we probably will start some of that
Right.
coming soon. But overall, I think, I was only supposed to come here as an interim for 1 year.
Wow. Okay.
About 2 weeks into it, they said, "Can you sign up for 2 years?" And then it was, "Hey, can you sign up for another 2 years?" And I have to say, like, I had a different vision of what Los Angeles would be like, and I had no idea what this area was. And I've got deer that come through the yard, and I've got
Oh,
mountains
wow.
right next to me. It's just so different than what I anticipated.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's the cool thing about the Barnhart community is just that, we're close to Los Angeles, but we're really like small town in a way.
Right. Yeah. Close to the big city, but you sort of have your own identity as well. Yeah. No, that's
Exactly.
that's great, Tim. So yeah. So again, You can let me know now. I'd love to, if you're open to it, to book a separate call to
Yeah.
discuss some of those other things if you're open to it. But what I'll do, Tim, is I'll just send you a follow-up email, give
Okay.
you probably the same calendar link so you can find a day time. If there's anybody else that you feel like needs to be part of that conversation, I would invite them, to
Okay.
be with you. I spoke to one school, he wanted their CFO to be in the conversation. Great. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Things like that. Just so as schools think about how can we become more efficient and nimble in the things that we
Right.
do to hopefully result in either increased enrollment, generate additional revenue, whatever it is, then the school leaders want other people sometimes besides themselves. And I get it as a school leader myself. 9 out of 10 times, the best ideas came from other people, not me.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, always stealing and taking credit for ideas.
right.
It's,
Yeah,
it's,
exactly. So I will send a follow up. Do you want the recording of the video, or for now you're good with just living here on my computer?
if you want to send the recording, it's fine.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
up to you. Yeah.
Okay. And again, like I said, if and when it goes to the broader audience, I'll come back and ask for
Yeah.
your permission. But what you can expect from me is the email just with the calendar link, and
Okay.
then I'll send you the recording as well, Tim.
Sounds great. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
No, I appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
It's great to speak with you. And I'm going to follow up with your friend at
Yeah,
Windward.
Sarah Beck is her name.
Okay. Sounds
Yeah.
great.
All
I
right.
appreciate
Thank you,
it.
sir.
Thank you. Okay.
Appreciate
See
it.
you later.